Red Canyon burned under the afternoon sun, turning the dust along the trail to gold. Sage Harper tugged the brim of her battered hat lower, eyes narrowed against the glare. In front of her, the wild Mustang, Ember, walked with her usual restless grace, ears swiveling at every sound. Sage had learned to trust the horse's nerves more than most men's advice. The supply wagon creaked behind them, heavy with crates, as the rest of the caravan trailed in a ragged line. They were halfway through the most dangerous stretch, where the walls of Red Canyon pressed in close and the wind carried whispers that made children shiver. Rosie, Sage's apprentice, rode beside her, bouncing nervously in her saddle. They'd heard stories about this place, the disappearances, the accidents nobody could quite explain. But the pay was good, and Sage's stubborn pride would never let her turn back. Suddenly, Ember stopped dead in her tracks. The horse's muscles rippled under her dark coat, and she pawed furiously at a patch of disturbed earth, nostrils flaring. Sage frowned, reins slack. The rest of the caravan grumbled and muttered. Pete, the merchant, leaned out of his wagon. "Come on, Sage, what's the holdup? We've got miles to go before sundown." Sage glanced back at him, but her focus snapped right to Ember. The Mustang's ears pinned flat. A shudder ran down her back. Sage slid off her saddle, boots raising small clouds of dust, and knelt beside her horse. "What is it, girl?" She pressed a hand to the ground. It felt wrong, soft, loose, like someone had been digging. Sage's gut twisted. Ember backed away, tail lashing, eyes wild. Sage rose slowly. Rosie slid down beside her, voice tight. "You think it's dangerous?" Sage nodded, scanning the ground. She could feel the tension crackling in the air, a warning you could taste. Pete shouted again, louder this time. "Are we moving or not? This is a waste of time." A couple of the others joined in, tempers flaring under the heat and the fear everyone pretended not to feel. Sage shook her head. "No, we stop here. Something's off, and I'm not risking Ember, or any of us." Her tone cut through the complaints. She had a reputation for being stubborn, but she also had a reputation for never losing a person, or a horse, on her watch. Pete sneered. "It's just a spooked Mustang, Sage. Not every shadow means trouble." Rosie took a shaky breath. She's never been wrong before. For a moment, the group teetered on the edge, follow Sage's warning, or force their way forward. The canyon pressed closer, the sun glaring down like an accusation. Suddenly, Ember reared, letting out a high, frantic whinny. The sound bounced off the canyon walls. The ground near her hooves shifted just slightly, enough for everyone to see. Pete's face blanched. "What the? Did you see that?" Sage pulled Rosie back. "Everybody off the wagons. Stay close. Keep quiet." The tension snapped from simmering to boiling in seconds. People scrambled down, clutching bags and glancing over their shoulders, as if the shadows themselves might reach out and grab them. Rosie whispered, "You really think there's something under there?" Sage nodded, jaw set. "We'll find out, but we're not leaving until we do." The others huddled together, fear finally overruling stubbornness. Even Pete stayed quiet now. Sage took her shovel and handed another to Rosie. "If you're scared, you don't have to." Rosie shook her head, determined. "I'm not leaving you, Sage." Ember paced nearby, never taking her eyes off the patch of earth. Every muscle in her body was coiled, ready to bolt or fight. They started digging, hands shaking but steady. The ground was loose, freshly turned. Every scrape of the shovel made Sage's heart hammer harder. After a few tense minutes, Rosie gasped, "Sage, look!" A scrap of faded blue cloth tangled in the dirt. Sage's hands trembled as she brushed away more earth, revealing a narrow, pale hand. Ember whickered, low and mournful. Rosie stumbled back, eyes wide. Oh God, it's a person. The crowd behind them erupted into a babble of fear and shock. Sage stood, turning slowly to face them all, her voice hard as iron. Nobody moves. Nobody says a word about this outside our group. Yet. Ember stamped her foot, as if agreeing. Rosie clung to Sage's arm, tears pricking her eyes. What do we do now? Sage didn't answer right away. The wind picked up, swirling the dust, carrying the scent of fear. She looked out at the canyon walls, at the frightened faces around her, and at the Mustang who'd tried to warn them all. We do what's right. We find out who did this. And we don't run. Somewhere, deep in the canyon, a hawk screamed, echoing the promise Sage made to herself. No matter how dark this got, she wouldn't back down. She'd never let Ember down, and she wouldn't let Red Canyon's secrets stay buried. Not anymore. The canyon felt colder now. The late sun was already sliding behind the red cliffs, throwing long, jagged shadows across the camp. Sage pressed a hand to Rosie's back, steadying the girl as she stared at the patch of earth they'd unearthed. The others stood a few yards away, whispering anxiously, every face pale. Rosie knelt back down, brushing more dirt from the faded blue dress tangled around the arm. Her voice shook. Do you think it's Elena Vargas? Sage swallowed. Elena had been missing for 2 weeks. She'd been one of the bravest ranch hands in the area, the kind of woman who'd fight a mountain lion if you gave her a good reason. Sage remembered Elena's easy laugh, her stubborn pride, the way she could outshoot most men in town. I think it is. We have to be sure. Rosie nodded, tears streaking her cheeks, and kept digging. Sage helped her, gentle but fast, trying to shield the scene from the rest of the caravan. Ember stood guard, muscles tense, watching the canyon walls as if expecting trouble to come rolling down at any second. Just as Rosie uncovered the edge of a boot, a sudden rumble of hoofbeats broke the heavy silence. Sage's head jerked up. She caught the flicker of movement at the canyon's edge. 5 men on horseback, their shadows thrown long by the dying sun. At their head rode Clayton Marsh. Sage's jaw clenched. Marsh was thick-necked and cruel-eyed, wearing a tailored vest too clean for honest work. He was flanked by men with rifles slung across their shoulders and scowls hard as rock. Rosie shrank closer to Sage. Clayton Marsh's voice carried easily. "What the hell are you doing on Marsh land?" Pete stammered, hands raised. We were just passing through, Mr. Marsh. We didn't mean any trouble." Clayton cut him off with a sneer. "You called digging up my property passing through. You folks just couldn't mind your own business." Sage stepped forward, forcing herself to stay calm. Ember moved with her, placing herself squarely between Marsh's men and Rosie. "This isn't about your property, Marsh. There's a body here, a woman's body." Clayton's eyes narrowed, but he didn't look surprised. Instead, he dismounted with a heavy thud, dust swirling around his boots. His men followed, fanning out to form a wall of muscle and gunmetal. "You found something you wish you hadn't. That's your only mistake today." Rosie's fingers found Sage's sleeve. "He's going to try something. I can feel it." Sage squeezed her arm, keeping her voice steady. "Stay behind me, Rosie. Don't let them get close." Clayton swaggered forward, every step deliberate. His eyes flicked to the exposed hand in the dirt. He glanced back at his men. "Cover them. Nobody moves unless I say so." One of the men, a burly rider with a scarred chin, cocked his rifle and aimed it straight at Sage. The others followed suit. Sage's heart hammered, but she forced herself to stand tall. "You want to explain this, Marsh? Or are you just going to threaten a bunch of wagon drivers? Clayton grinned, wolfish. I don't owe you any explanations, Harper. All I owe is a warning. Leave this place, forget what you saw, and nobody gets hurt. Sage spat in the dirt. Not happening. We're not leaving Elena like this. And we're not letting you scare us off. The men bristled. Tension grew thick enough to choke. The rest of the caravan cowered behind their wagons, some looking like they might run, others frozen with fear. Ember snorted, head high, mane tossing, her ears pinned back, and she stamped the ground with a force that rattled Sage's bones. One of Marsh's men stepped forward, gun raised. You deaf, Harper? You want to die out here for some dead girl? Sage's mind raced. There was no way they could win a shootout, not with Rosie and the others so close. But running would mean never knowing the truth, and leaving Elena lost forever. Then Ember exploded. With a scream, the Mustang reared up, hooves flashing in the late light. Marsh's men flinched back instinctively. Ember lunged, snapping her teeth, her wildness breaking the tense standoff. The horses ridden by Marsh's men spooked and reared, one of them bolting for the canyon wall. Clayton cursed, stumbling as his horse jerked sideways. The distraction was enough. Sage grabbed Rosie and hauled her back, shouting for the others, "Run, now!" Ember spun, clearing a path with wild kicks. Rosie clung to Sage's hand, and together they raced for the narrow gap between the canyon walls, the rest of the caravan following in a panicked rush. Gunfire cracked behind them, bullets sparking off stone. But nobody stopped running. Yata Sage chanced a glance back. Clayton Marsh screaming orders, his men struggling to control their terrified horses, dust and chaos everywhere. Ember ran beside Sage, never faltering. The Mustang's wild heart had saved them all. They reached a bend in the canyon, out of sight, breathless and shaking. Sage pulled Rosie into a tight hug. Ember pressed against them, her body trembling but unhurt. "We're alive," Sage whispered, voice trembling, and for the first time her confidence cracked. Rosie nodded, tears streaming, but there was a fierce light in her eyes. "We can't let them get away with this, Sage. We can't." Sage looked down at her apprentice, at Ember, wild and loyal and afraid, and nodded. "No, we can't." Behind them, the last light of day slipped away, leaving only darkness and the memory of gunfire echoing in Red Canyon. Night fell hard over Red Canyon, the kind of darkness that made you question every shadow, every sound. Sage, Rosie, and Ember moved as quietly as they could through the brush, guided only by starlight and the faint shimmer of Ember's pale mane. Behind them, the echoes of gunshots still lingered, carried on the wind. They didn't speak. There was nothing safe to say until they'd put real distance between themselves and the Marshmen. Finally, Sage spotted what she was hoping for. The abandoned line shack she'd heard about from old-timers, half buried in scrub and moonlight. The roof sagged, and one window was boarded, but the walls still stood. To a pair of fugitives, it looked like a castle. "Here," Sage whispered, pulling Rosie along by the hand. Ember followed, sides heaving, flanks damp with sweat. Inside, the shack was cramped and musty, but safe. Sage slid the rusty bolt across the door, heart pounding as if Marsh and his men were already pounding at the walls. Rosie slumped down on a pile of old canvas sacks, hugging her knees. "Do you think they'll come after us tonight?" Sage pressed an ear to the door, listening for any pursuit. Only the whir of night insects and Ember's soft snort drifted through the darkness. "Not tonight. They'll wait for daylight. Too risky to hunt us in the dark." She crouched by Rosie, forcing herself to sound steady, even as her mind raced. She thought about Pete, the caravan, and prayed they'd gotten clear. Ember pressed her nose to the cracked window, nostrils wide, watching the canyon as if daring danger to show itself. Sage walked over and stroked her mane, letting the horse's heartbeat slow her own. "You saved us today, girl." "You did." Rosie watched the two of them, her face streaked with dust and tears. "I never thought I'd see a horse act like that." It's like she knew what Marsh was planning. Sage smiled faintly, feeling the fatigue settling in her bones. "Ember's smart. Smarter than most people. She's gotten me out of more trouble than I care to count." A silence settled between them, thick but not unfriendly. Rosie fiddled with the hem of her shirt. "Can I tell you something? About my family?" Sage nodded. "Sure, Rosie." Rosie hesitated, then spoke in a hush, her words tumbling out like pebbles down a hill. "My PA. He used to work for the Marshes, back when I was little. They owned everything: land, water, even the sheriff. Pa saw things, bad things, but he was afraid. He always told me, 'Keep your head down, don't make trouble. The Marshes can ruin anyone.'" Sage listened, understanding blooming in her chest. She'd seen the Marshes reach herself, how they bent the rules, how fear kept folks quiet. "Why'd your PA leave?" "He tried to help a girl once, one who knew too much. After that, we had to move. He never talked about it again." Rosie looked away, blinking back tears. "I'm scared, Sage. Marsh saw my face. What if he—" Sage put a hand on her shoulder, firm. "Hey, listen. We did what's right. That takes guts, and I'm not letting anything happen to you or Ember." Rosie managed a wobbly smile. "You always this brave?" Sage let out a tired laugh. "No. Most days I'm just stubborn. A sudden noise outside, branches cracking, made them freeze." Sage snatched up an old shotgun she'd found leaning by the door. Rosie crept to Ember's side, heart thudding. The noise faded. Just a rabbit, or maybe the wind. But the fear was real. Sage put the gun down, hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "We'll take turns keeping watch. I'll go first." "No," Rosie said, voice firmer. "We'll do it together." They settled in by the window, backs to the wall, eyes scanning the black beyond. Ember lay down nearby, but her ears twitched, alert to every sound. The hours crawled by, the shack shrinking around them. Sage's thoughts turned over and over. Elena's body, Marsh's threats, the way the canyon seemed to hold its breath. She wondered if Pete and the others had made it out, or if Marsh's men would come after them, one by one. After a long while, Rosie spoke up, so soft Sage almost didn't hear. "Do you ever regret it? Doing the right thing, I mean." Sage stared at the stars, visible through a gap in the roof. "Sometimes, when it costs more than you think you can pay. But Ember taught me to trust what I feel. And right now, I know if we run, Elena never gets justice." Rosie wiped her nose. "Do you think we'll make it out of this?" Sage glanced at Ember, at Rosie, and out into the night. "If we stick together, if we trust each other, I think we've got a chance." They listened to the wind, to Ember's soft breathing, to their own hearts hammering in their chests. In that lonely shack, with fear pressing close and the shadows waiting outside, Sage and Rosie found a spark of hope. They weren't alone. Not anymore. And as Sage watched Ember drift into a restless sleep, she made herself a silent promise. No matter what the Marshes threw at them, they would not let this story die in the dust. Dawn crept into the shack, seeping through broken planks and cracks, painting faint gold stripes across the worn floor. Sage had managed little sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Elena's hand reaching through the dirt, or the flash of Marsh's rifle in the dying sunlight. Still, there was comfort in the simple rhythm of Ember's breathing, in Rosie's quiet presence nearby. The world beyond the shack was changing color, But in here, everything was still, suspended, just for a little while. Sage sat up and stretched, wincing at the stiffness in her shoulders. Rosie was already awake, watching her with wide, anxious eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, Ember grazed on a patch of stubborn grass, her chestnut coat glowing as the sun rose over Red Canyon. She seemed calmer now, but every so often her head snapped up, ears twitching toward some distant sound only she could sense. "You think they're looking for us yet?" Rosie finally asked, her voice almost a whisper. Sage shook her head, forcing a calm she didn't quite feel. "Maybe, but we got a head start last night, and this shack's off most trails. Marsh will probably search the main roads first. He's got to be careful. Too much noise and the whole town starts asking questions." Rosie looked unconvinced, hugging her knees to her chest. "I keep thinking about Elena, how scared she must have been, how nobody listened to her except us." Sage's chest tightened. She remembered when she first got Ember, a wild Mustang, freshly caught, more likely to bite than to trust a human. Everyone in town had called Sage crazy for trying to gentle her. Even her father had warned her it was a fool's errand. "You can't break a wild thing, Sage. She'll just break your heart." But Sage hadn't tried to break Ember. She'd learned to listen. She'd let Ember come to her in her own time, patient through 100 failed attempts, every buck and snort and sideways glance. One night, during a thunderstorm, Sage had found herself trapped under a toppled beam in the barn. It was Ember, untethered, frantic, who'd dragged the timber aside, nudging Sage's shoulder until she could stand. "That horse saved my life," Sage said softly, half to herself. "And more times than I can count. Her instincts have saved us both. You can't teach that kind of trust. You just earn it." Rosie watched Ember through the window, thoughtful. "I wish I could be more like her. Brave, I mean. When Marsh was yelling, I just froze." Sage smiled gently. "That's not fear, Rosie. That's courage. Sticking with what's right, even when you're scared out of your mind." Rosie blinked, surprised. "You really believe that?" Sage nodded. "I do. Courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's about standing up anyway." She stood and stretched again, pushing away fatigue. Her mind spun through their options. What was safe, what was smart, and what was right. We can't just stay hidden. If Marsh finds us, or the sheriff hears about a gunfight in the canyon, we'll have no story to tell. No proof Elena was ever there. We need to go to the sheriff ourselves. Show her what we found, before Marsh can twist things around. Rosie's brow furrowed. But what if the sheriff's on Marsh's side? My PA always said the law was bought and paid for out here. Sage considered this. Sheriff May Garrett had a reputation for being tough, but in these parts, tough didn't always mean honest. Still, Sage had seen her stand up to Marsh once before, when he tried to swindle a widow out of her land. It was a gamble, but so was everything else now. "We don't go in blind," Sage said. "We take what proof we have, the scrap of dress, anything else we can find at the grave. We tell her together, and we don't go alone. There's strength in numbers." Rosie nodded, determination starting to flicker in her eyes. "I'll back you up, even if my voice shakes." Sage grinned. That's the spirit. She gathered her saddlebag and checked the old shotgun again, just in case. Rosie helped, still shaky but moving with more purpose now. They ate a cold breakfast, barely tasting it. Sage scribbled a quick note on the back of a supply list, just in case someone from the caravan found the shack before they returned. She left it under a stone outside, with a piece of Ember's tail hair tied around it. Before they left, Sage knelt beside Ember, whispering softly, "We're counting on you again, girl. You ready?" Ember nudged her shoulder, warm breath against Sage's cheek. Rosie smiled, and for a moment the fear receded, replaced by hope. The three set out, sticking to the scrub and shadows, avoiding open ground, as they made their way back toward the site. The path was quiet, but every bird call and distant hoofbeat made Rosie tense. "What if Marsh's men are waiting for us?" Rosie whispered. Sage scanned the horizon. "If they are, we stick to the plan. Don't run unless I say so. Trust me, and trust Ember." As they neared the grave, Sage slowed, heart thudding. Everything looked the same, but the silence was heavy, like the canyon was holding its breath. Rosie squeezed Sage's hand, and Ember's ears went forward, alert but calm. Sage felt the weight of all her choices pressing down, but she drew strength from the horse beside her, and from Rosie's trust. No matter what happened next, they weren't running anymore. They were going to fight, for Elena, for the truth, and for each other. And as the sun climbed higher, Red Canyon glowed with the promise of justice. If only they could hold on to their courage and the lessons that wild horses and lost friends had taught them. A sharp chill hung in the pre-dawn air as Sage, Rosie, and Ember made their way down a narrow ravine, staying close to the high stone walls that shielded them from view. The plan was simple but dangerous. Cut through the canyon's back trails, return to the sheriff by sunrise, and hand over what they'd found before Clayton Marsh could cover his tracks. But as the pale light crept over Red Canyon, every shadow seemed to move. Every gust of wind carried the threat of footsteps behind them. Rosie's breath fogged in the cold air. She kept glancing over her shoulder, her nerves raw after the previous day's ordeal. Ember led the way, hooves almost silent on the sandy ground, muscles taut beneath her glossy hide. Sage trusted her Mustang completely. If danger lurked, Ember would sense it first. They reached the bend where the ravine opened onto a patch of dry grass. Sage motioned for Rosie to pause. She scanned the horizon. No sign of Marsh or his men, just the endless red and gold of the canyon at sunrise. Sage's muscles relaxed, just a little. "We're almost there, Rosie," Sage murmured, squeezing her apprentice's shoulder. But as they stepped out, Ember suddenly froze, ears flattened, her whole body a live wire. "Sage," Rosie's voice trembled. "Something's wrong." A rock tumbled from above. Then, without warning, 3 men erupted from the shadows. Marsh's enforcers, faces grim and hard, rifles drawn. The sun hit the barrel of a gun, blinding for a split second. "Back up now!" the tallest man barked, waving his weapon. "Nobody moves, nobody gets hurt." Sage instinctively put herself between Rosie and the gunman. Ember danced sideways, nostrils flaring, hackles raised. The ravine's walls turned the world into a trap, a dead end with nowhere to run. "We're just passing through," Sage called, her voice calm but carrying. "Let us be, and nobody needs to get hurt." The man sneered. "Orders are orders. Mr. Marsh says you don't leave this canyon." The shortest thug stepped forward, aiming his rifle square at Rosie. "We know what you found. Give it up. The sheriff doesn't need to see anything. You don't need to go telling stories." Rosie's eyes filled with fear, but she straightened her back, hands clenched. Sage felt pride and dread twist together in her gut. "No," Rosie said, her voice small but clear. "We're not leaving Elena behind. We're not backing down." The leader's patience snapped. He cocked his rifle, finger tightening on the trigger. "You got a death wish, girl?" Before anyone could react, Ember lunged. The Mustang's scream echoed off the rocks, wild, furious, unbroken. She charged the nearest man, hooves flashing, teeth bared. The ambushers flinched back, startled by the animal's ferocity. Sage seized the moment. "Run, now!" She grabbed Rosie's hand and sprinted toward the narrowest part of the ravine, Ember at their side. Gunfire shattered the morning stillness. Bullets whined off stone. Dust stung Sage's eyes. The world blurred to fear and motion. Rosie's breath harsh in her ears. Ember whirled around, kicking sand in the men's faces, forcing them to shield their eyes. Sage and Rosie ducked behind a boulder, hearts thudding. "They're splitting up," Sage hissed. "We have to move fast." Ember danced nervously, eyes rolling, but she stood her ground. Rosie pressed herself against the rock, shaking. Sage studied the ground, searching for an escape. The ravine narrowed just ahead, barely wide enough for a horse. It was a risk, but the only way out. "Stay close," Sage whispered. "Ember goes first, then you. I'll cover from behind." Rosie nodded, wiping away tears. Ember pawed the ground, muscles bunching. Sage gave her a gentle slap on the haunches. "Go, girl, get them out!" The Mustang shot forward. Rosie close on her heels. Sage turned, firing the old shotgun once into the air. A warning, not meant to kill, but enough to scatter the gunmen. They dove for cover, shouting curses. The three of them plunged into the ravine's throat. The space was so tight, Sage had to turn sideways, scraping her arms on jagged stone. Ember wriggled through, hooves scrabbling. Jose stumbled, but Sage caught her. "Keep moving! Don't stop!" A shot rang out. Splintered stone sprayed Sage's shoulder. Pain burned down her arm, but she gritted her teeth and shoved Rosie ahead. The light at the end of the passage grew brighter, freedom just beyond reach. Suddenly, Ember reared, blocking the exit with her body as one of Marsh's men tried to circle around. The Mustang's eyes blazed. She lashed out, sending the man sprawling into the dust. Rosie scrambled through the opening, Sage right behind her, Ember bolting after them. The three collapsed in the sunlit clearing, lungs aching. "We made it!" Rosie gasped. Sage checked her shoulder. A bloody graze, nothing worse. She hugged Rosie fiercely, tears springing to her own eyes. "You're all right. You're safe." Ember paced around them, still on edge, but her breathing slowed as she realized they'd escaped. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit faded. Marsh's men weren't reckless enough to follow a wild Mustang into a blind canyon. Rosie hugged Sage, sobbing. "I thought we were finished. I thought—" Sage shook her head, pulling Rosie close. "Not while I'm breathing. Not while Ember's still standing." As the sun climbed higher, they gathered themselves, shaken but alive. The ambush had rattled them, but it had also made something clear. They were fighting for more than justice. They were fighting for their right to be heard, to refuse the lies that powerful men tried to bury. Rosie looked up, resolve blazing through her tears. "We go to the sheriff, no matter what." Sage nodded. With Ember beside them, and the truth in their hands, they would face whatever came next. They didn't stop moving until the canyon walls finally gave way to the open scrub at its far end. Sage's arm throbbed with every heartbeat, but she ignored it. Rosie walked close beside her, glancing back every few steps, as if afraid Marsh's men would materialize from the shadows. Ember pressed ahead, her coat still damp, nostrils wide, head high and alert. The sun was climbing fast, scattering the night's terror, but not the dread clinging to Sage's heart. They circled wide around the main road, staying out of sight, heading for the sheriff's office on the edge of town. It was a squat building, shaded by two battered sycamores, already hot to the touch. Sage had never felt so exposed. Every step felt like a dare. Every window seemed to have watching eyes behind it. Inside, Sheriff May Garrett sat at her desk, booted feet up, scanning the morning's mail. Her iron-gray hair was pulled back tight, her eyes sharp and tired. Sage barged in, Rosie and Ember crowding the doorway behind her. "Sheriff?" Sage's voice rang out, urgent. "We found Elena Vargas. She's dead, buried out in Red Canyon. Marsh's men tried to kill us for it." Garrett's gaze didn't flicker. She studied Sage a long, hard moment. "Sit down. Start from the beginning." Sage explained, voice shaking. Rosie jumping in with what she saw. Ember's wild warning, the ambush, the grave, everything. She handed over the scrap of blue dress they'd saved, still crusted with canyon dirt. Garrett listened, face grim. When Sage finished, the sheriff stood, all business. "You're bleeding. I'll fetch Doc Carter. You two, don't move and don't talk to anyone till I get back." Garrett was gone only a moment. The doctor patched Sage's shoulder in silence. Rosie sat on the edge of her seat, knees bouncing, eyes fixed on Ember, as if the Mustang was the only safe thing in the room. Sheriff Garrett returned, gun belt buckled, face hard. "You're sure about Marsh?" "As sure as I am about anything," Sage said quietly. "He showed up at the grave, threatened us, sent men to kill us." Garrett nodded. "I'll handle it. But you two stay here, safe for now." She left in a swirl of dust, deputies at her heels. For an hour, Sage and Rosie sat in tense silence, every sound outside making them flinch. Ember paced by the window, her breath fogging the glass. Finally, the office door slammed. Clayton Marsh stormed in, flanked by his brother Jeb and two deputies. "You're accusing me of murder?" Marsh thundered, his face red with fury. "This is slander, Garrett. These girls are nothing but troublemakers." Garrett stepped between them, unyielding. "Sage found Elena's body, Marsh. We have evidence. You and your men were there. You want to explain?" Jeb Marsh spat at Sage's boots. "You're going to believe a nobody over my family? Over a Mustang and a couple of girls?" Rosie's fists clenched. Sage stood, eyes never leaving Clayton Marsh's face. "I know what I saw, and so do you." Clayton's bravado slipped. Just a little. He looked at his brother, then back at Garrett, jaw working. "You think I had something to do with this? That I'd let some ranch hand end up dead on my land?" Rosie's voice rang out, louder than before. "You didn't just let it happen. You covered it up, just like you covered up the others." Jeb lunged forward, but a deputy blocked him. Garrett's eyes bored into Clayton. "Last chance, Marsh. You want to tell me what really happened? Or do I drag it out of you in front of the whole town?" Clayton's hands shook. The tough veneer crumbled. His voice came out broken, heavy with secrets. It was Jeb. "Elena threatened to talk. She'd seen what we did. How we ran off folks, fixed the books, buried things best left alone. Jeb got scared. Did something stupid. I helped bury her. I was scared, all right? I just wanted it gone." The words echoed in the little office. Jeb roared, trying to shove past the deputies, but Garrett's team held him back. "You fool!" Jeb snarled. "You said you'd handle it." Clayton slumped into a chair, eyes glassy. He barely seemed to hear his brother's rage. Sage felt no triumph, only the sick, heavy relief of truth revealed. Rosie stared at Clayton, mouth open in shock. "Why?" Sage asked quietly. "Why cover up so much?" Clayton's voice was hollow. "Because nobody tells the Marshes what to do. We own this canyon. Or we used to." Garrett nodded to her deputies. "Take them both, lock them up, and bring in every man who worked that land. This goes deeper than two brothers." The deputies hauled Jeb out, kicking and cursing. Clayton just sagged, empty, as if confessing had drained the last of his fight. Garrett turned to Sage and Rosie. "You did right. You brought the truth. Not everyone would have." Sage slumped, exhausted. Rosie sank into a chair, tears streaming. We just wanted Elena to matter, Rosie whispered. Garrett's expression softened. Just a little, she does. Thanks to you. As the Marsh brothers were dragged away, Ember pressed her nose against Sage's arm. Warm, grounding, real. Sage scratched her Mustang's jaw, looking at Rosie, then at the sheriff. It's over. For now, Sage said. But deep down she knew this was only the beginning. Of justice. Of healing. And maybe, just maybe, of hope for Red Canyon. By midday, word had spread through Red Canyon like wildfire. Folks who'd always kept their heads down now gathered in knots along Main Street, faces tense and curious. Sage stood near the sheriff's office, her arm bandaged, Rosie beside her, Ember tethered nearby. The Mustang's ears flicked at every sound. Hoofbeats, whispers, distant hammering. The whole town seemed to pulse with nervous energy, waiting for what came next. Sheriff May Garrett emerged, deputies at her side, her voice ringing clear. We're searching Marsh property. Every barn, every shed, every inch. If you know something, now's the time to speak up. No one argued. The Marsh brothers, once feared, were locked up, their empire crumbling. Still, suspicion hung heavy. Years of secrets didn't vanish overnight. Sage watched as Garrett organized search parties. Rosie helped, eyes red but fierce, making lists of missing girls, comes whispered from mothers and sisters who'd lost hope years ago. For every name, Sage felt a new weight settle on her shoulders. This wasn't just about Elena. This was about everyone the Marshes had hurt. A ranch hand in dusty overalls approached the sheriff, voice shaking. Ma'am, I was out by the north fence last night. I heard shots, thought it was just coyotes, but maybe it was more. Garrett's eyes narrowed. Show me. With Sage and Rosie riding behind, Garrett and her deputies followed the man out of town. Ember picked her way carefully across rocky ground, sniffing at unfamiliar scents. The group reached a narrow draw lined with scrub oak. The earth there had been churned recently, the dirt loose and stained. Garrett crouched, using her knife to pry away the topsoil. She uncovered scraps of cloth, a woman's locket, then, grimly, a second shallow grave. A hush fell over the group. Rosie gripped Sage's hand. How many more? She whispered. Garrett's voice was iron. We'll find them all. We owe them that. News traveled fast. By afternoon, dozens of townspeople joined the searches. Some wept quietly. Some brought shovels. Others brought casseroles or strong coffee, determined to help in any way they could. As the sun burned westward, the searchers found grave after grave, evidence of a pattern the Marshes had tried to erase. With every new discovery, anger simmered in the crowd. Old men muttered about long memories and paying for sins. Women embraced each other, some collapsing in relief, others in grief, as the truth finally came to light. By sundown, Garrett stood on the courthouse steps. The crowd pressed close, silent, desperate for closure. Sheriff Garrett's voice cut through the hush. For too long, justice in Red Canyon belonged to the rich and the ruthless. Today, that ends. The Marsh brothers are in custody, charged with murder, conspiracy, and corruption. Their men will answer for what they've done. A murmur rose, swelling into a low roar of approval. Sage felt Rosie lean against her, exhausted but proud. Ember lifted her head, sensing the shift. A burden lifted, if only for a moment. Garrett raised a hand. This community survives because we look out for each other. The days of silence are over. If you know something, if you've been hurt or lost someone, come forward. We stand together now. The crowd erupted. Tears, hugs, shouts of gratitude. For a moment, Red Canyon felt whole. Sage found herself surrounded by neighbors, people she'd known for years, but who had always kept a polite distance. Now they squeezed her hands, clapped her back, thanked her for what she'd done. "I only did what was right," Sage said, her voice hoarse. It was Ember who saw the truth first. Rosie grinned. "You both did." As the moon rose, Garrett's deputies led the Marsh brothers, shackled and silent, through the crowd. The town watched. No one jeered, but the message was clear. The days of fear were finished. A young woman stepped forward, tears streaming, clutching a photo of her missing sister. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you for not letting us be forgotten." Sage took her hand, feeling the pain and hope tangled together. "You're not alone, not anymore." Rosie hugged Sage fiercely, and for the first time since the nightmare began, they both laughed, a real laugh, cracked but bright, the kind that comes after a long, hard rain. Ember nuzzled them both, eyes dark and steady. The Mustang had become a legend already, her wild spirit woven into the story the town would tell for generations. Garrett approached Sage one last time that night, her face softer, pride in her eyes. "You gave this town back its soul." Not many can say that. Sage shrugged, a faint smile on her lips. "I just listened, sometimes to my horse, sometimes to my heart." The sheriff nodded. "Keep doing both. The world needs more of it." As the townsfolk drifted home, Sage, Rosie, and Ember lingered, watching the courthouse windows flicker with lamplight. For once, Red Canyon felt like a place where the truth could breathe, a place where no one, alive or dead, would be forgotten. And in the hush that followed, Sage knew their fight had mattered. Justice had finally come to Red Canyon, carried on the back of a wild Mustang and the courage of those who refused to stay silent. The days that followed felt softer, as if the whole of Red Canyon was exhaling after years of holding its breath. The air still tasted of dust and sage, but now it carried new voices, gentle and sad and thankful. News of the Marsh brothers' arrest spread beyond the canyon, reaching ranches, mining camps, even far-flung towns where the missing were remembered only in faded photographs on bedroom shelves. For the first time in years, people gathered not in fear, but in purpose. They met under the wide oak trees behind the church, the ground ringed with rows of white stones and new wooden markers, hammered together by volunteers who barely knew each other a week before. The town set aside its differences for a day. Ranch hands, merchants, mothers, daughters, even folks who had once worked for the Marshes, all came together to remember the ones they'd lost. Sage stood at the front, her arms still bound, Rosie at her side, Ember close enough that Sage could rest a hand on her warm neck. Rosie wore a clean dress, but her eyes still carried the storm of the last few days. As the townspeople gathered, she clutched a faded piece of paper, the names of every girl and woman missing in Red Canyon over the past 20 years. For some, there were only first names. For others, only a memory or a rumor. Pastor Bennett led the service, his voice trembling as he read out each name, letting the silence that followed sink deep into the earth. Mothers wept softly. Fathers stood with hands folded, faces streaked with tears and dust. Some in the crowd clung to photographs. Others only closed their eyes and listened, hoping for the sound of a lost voice in the wind. Ember stood so still she might have been carved from sunlight, mane rippling in the gentle breeze. Children watched her, eyes wide with awe, whispering stories about the wild Mustang who had led Sage to the truth. Some claimed she was magic, sent by the spirits of the canyon. Others simply believed she was brave, and that was magic enough. After the names were read, the townspeople moved to the new graves. They laid wildflowers and small stones, tokens of love and apology for every year spent in silence. Rosie knelt and pressed her palm to the earth above Elena Vargas, whispering a promise. "We remember you. We won't let you disappear again." Sage knelt beside her, squeezing Rosie's shoulder. The two of them sat in silence, the weight of their journey finally settling in. "Do you think Elena knew someone would come for her?" Rosie asked quietly. Sage thought of all the times she doubted herself, of every risk and every moment she wanted to turn back. She glanced at Ember, who met her gaze with eyes dark and kind. "I think she hoped," Sage replied. "And sometimes hope is enough to keep a soul waiting until justice comes." The townspeople lingered, sharing food and stories, memories of the women they'd lost, stories of laughter and stubbornness, moments that made them real again. Sage found herself drawn into these circles, listening, offering a shoulder or a quiet word. The mayor approached, clearing his throat awkwardly. "You did something we couldn't, Sage. You and Rosie. You brought us together. You made us see each other again." Sage looked around at the crowd, faces changed by grief, but also by gratitude. "It wasn't just us," she said. "It was Ember. It was every person who chose to speak when it was easier to stay quiet." The mayor nodded, swallowing hard. "Maybe this is how we start over." As dusk fell, the memorial became a celebration. Someone brought out a battered guitar, and soon old songs drifted through the twilight. Rosie laughed for the first time in days, her voice young and bright again. Sage watched as Ember let the children braid wildflowers into her mane, patient and gentle, as if she understood the healing they needed. The sheriff stopped by, hat in hand, her face tired but relieved. "We'll be taking the Marshes to trial soon," she said. "This town owes you, both of you, more than I can say." Sage smiled. "Just do right by them, by all of them. That's all we ask." As the moon rose, a sense of peace settled over Red Canyon. A fragile thing, but real. The victims were no longer lost in the shadows. Their names had been spoken, their lives honored. The town had begun to mend, not just the land, but the hearts that called it home. Sage, Rosie, and Ember walked together to the canyon's edge, where the land fell away in a sweep of red and gold. Sage let the silence linger, letting the lessons of the past days settle deep. "Thank you," Sage whispered to Ember, to Rosie, to the wind and the canyon itself. "Thank you for the courage to listen. Thank you for the strength to act." Rosie slipped her hand into Sage's. "What do we do now?" Sage watched the horizon, where a new sun would rise. "We remember," she said. "We keep telling the truth, and we look out for each other. That's how things change." In the distance, laughter and music floated up from the town, mixing with the sound of the night wind. And for the first time, Red Canyon felt less like a graveyard, and more like a place where hope could take root. The morning after the memorial, Sage woke to the sounds of life returning to Red Canyon. A chorus of voices, hammers striking nails, even the distant whinny of horses from the main street. For the first time in years, the town felt like it was waking up from a bad dream, blinking into the bright, clear light of a new day. Sage slipped quietly out of bed, her bandaged arm aching but healing. Rosie was still asleep, curled up beneath a patchwork quilt. The lines of worry on her face finally softened. Sage paused for a moment, watching the girl breathe deeply, grateful for the peace that now filled the little house. She moved quietly to the front porch, where Ember waited, grazing on the fresh green shoots that had sprung up after the recent rains. Ember lifted her head as Sage approached, dark eyes gentle and knowing. Chad rested her forehead against the Mustang's neck, closing her eyes, letting her thoughts settle. "You always know, don't you, girl?" For a while, she just stood there, listening to the quiet morning, the wind rustling through the mesquite, the rhythmic sound of Ember's breath. It felt like a lifetime had passed since the day Ember stopped cold on the canyon trail, refusing to move, warning Sage and the others that danger lay ahead. Sage remembered every moment, the cold terror of discovery, the heat of Marsh's threats, the frantic escape through narrow ravines, the desperate race for justice. She remembered the way Ember had acted, not just as a horse, but as a partner, a guardian. Without her, none of it would have been possible. She thought back to lessons learned, some old, some new. Ember had taught her the most important one, to trust her instincts, even when everyone else doubted. That trust had saved lives, had brought justice to those long forgotten. Sage heard the door creak and turned. Rosie stepped out, blinking sleepily, hair tangled, but her eyes brighter than they'd been in days. "Morning, Rosie. Morning, Sage. Did you sleep at all?" "A little," Sage admitted. "Enough to dream." Rosie stroked Ember's nose, smiling shyly. "I dreamed about Elena. She wasn't scared. She was smiling. She thanked us." Sage felt a lump in her throat, but she smiled through it. Maybe she was. Maybe she is. They sat together on the porch steps, Ember lowering her head to nuzzle their shoulders. For a long time, they just watched the town stir. Men repaired fences. Women swept dust from porches. Children, no longer afraid, ran through the streets, chasing each other with sticks and laughter. Rosie broke the silence. "Do you ever wish things could go back to the way they were? Before all this?" Sage shook her head, looking out at the canyon's red cliffs glowing in the morning sun. "No, I used to, but not anymore. Sometimes things have to break before they can be put right. Sometimes the truth has to come out, no matter how much it hurts." Rosie nodded. "I guess I'm not scared anymore. Not like before, I think standing up was worth it." Sage reached for her hand. "Me too." After a while, they walked down to the old oak where the new graves lay, wildflowers already growing along the edges. Sage knelt beside Elena's marker, brushing dirt from the carved name. "We did what we could," Sage whispered. "You're not forgotten. None of you." Rosie stood silent, head bowed, and Ember circled the graves, careful and respectful, as if she too understood the weight of memory. Back in town, folks greeted them differently, no longer with suspicion or awkward silence, but with nods, smiles, words of thanks. A few even stopped to ask about Ember, wanting to know how a wild Mustang could be so loyal, so wise. Sage answered patiently, sharing stories, letting children feed the mare handfuls of oats. One old man approached, hat in hand. "Miss Harper, you think we could have stopped this years ago, if we'd listened better? Maybe to each other. Maybe even to the horses?" Sage smiled, a little sad, a little hopeful. "I think listening is the hardest thing. But maybe now we start. Maybe now every warning, every voice, every instinct gets a chance to be heard." The man nodded, tipping his hat before he shuffled away. That afternoon, Sage and Rosie helped repair the line shack that had sheltered them during their darkest night. They painted it fresh, patched the roof, and left a message scratched into the doorframe. "Here we found courage. Here we found truth." Ember stood guard, watching the horizon, a living reminder of what had been risked and what had been gained. As evening settled, Rosie turned to Sage. "What if someone else comes, looking for help or justice? What do we tell them?" Sage considered it, then smiled. "We tell them to trust what they know in their bones, to listen, to people, to animals, to the world itself, and to never, ever back down from what's right." Rosie nodded, a spark of determination lighting her face. "We'll help them. just like we helped Elena. As the sky faded to lavender and gold, Sage and Rosie climbed onto Ember's back together, riding slowly along the ridge above Red Canyon. They looked down at the town, at the little white crosses, at the people who'd chosen hope over fear. Sage wrapped an arm around Rosie, whispering into the evening breeze, "Thank you, Ember, for everything." And with the Mustang's wild heart beneath them and the promise of a new dawn ahead, they rode on, ready to face whatever might come, certain that the lessons they'd learned would guide them and Red Canyon into a brighter future. The days slipped into weeks, and Red Canyon transformed. Sunrises seemed brighter now, filling the valley with light that touched every corner, no longer shadowed by secrets or fear. Fences were mended. New businesses opened on Main Street. Children played freely in the alleys where only silence had reigned before. The town, once fractured by suspicion, now buzzed with cautious hope. But the scars remained, reminders of what had been lost and what had been found. Sage Harper felt those changes in every sunrise, every handshake, every grateful glance she and Rosie received as they passed. Ember had become a local legend. People stopped to watch her when she crossed the street, some tipping their hats, others whispering stories to their children. There were drawings of the Mustang taped to windows, painted onto the side of the schoolhouse, even carved into the benches outside the bakery. Sometimes, Sage would wake early, unable to shake old nightmares, and take Ember out to the canyon's edge, where the land fell away in a sweep of red stone and sky. Rosie would join her, bringing coffee, the two of them sharing a quiet peace that came only after hardship. One morning, Sage stood alone with Ember, watching the sun climb. The Mustang's mane caught the breeze, glowing copper and gold. Sage spoke aloud, as if to the whole canyon. "We did it, girl. We gave them back their voices. You showed me what it means to be brave." She thought of everything that had led to this moment. The grave, the chase, the confessions, the pain and healing. She knew the journey wasn't just about bringing justice to Elena or the others. It was about changing the very heart of the community, teaching them all to listen, to stand up, to fight for what's right even when it seemed impossible. Rosie joined her, settling onto a rock beside them, legs swinging, eyes thoughtful. "You think people will remember?" she asked softly. "Or will things just go back to the way they were?" Sage shook her head, a gentle smile on her lips. "They'll remember. Maybe not every detail, but the feeling, the courage, the change. And they'll tell stories. About you, about Ember, about standing up when it was hardest." Rosie smiled, pride flickering in her eyes. "I hope so. I want them to know that anyone can make a difference. Even someone who's scared or small, or just one person against a big family." Sage nodded. "That's the lesson, Rosie. That's what lasts. Not just the story of what happened, but the truth that lives in everyone who hears it. True courage isn't loud or showy. It's in listening to your heart, to the warnings nature gives, to the people who need you, and then acting, no matter the cost." The sheriff visited that day, walking quietly up the path. "The trial's set for next month," she said, her voice weary but strong. "There's more work to do. Some of Marsh's old men are still hiding things, but the town's with us now. They're not afraid anymore." Sage squeezed her hand. "We'll help, however we can." The sheriff's eyes softened. "You already have. You gave us back our backbone." As the sheriff walked away, Sage watched Rosie braid wildflowers into Ember's mane. She realized that the Mustang's wild spirit had done more than save lives. It had started something bigger, something that would ripple through Red Canyon long after they were gone. The weeks passed, and the town continued to heal. At the new schoolhouse, Sage was invited to speak. She stood before a room of children, Rosie beside her, Ember waiting patiently outside, her presence enough to quiet even the most restless. Sage told them the story, not of violence and fear, but of courage and trust, and the power of acting when your heart says it's right. Sometimes, she said, the warnings we get don't come in words. They come in a horse's refusal to move, in a shiver down your spine, in the quiet voice inside that says something isn't right. Listen to those warnings, and never be afraid to speak the truth, even when you stand alone. Afterward, the children crowded around Ember, running their hands over her glossy coat, asking her to stay forever. Sage smiled, knowing the Mustang's story would live on in every child's imagination. On the anniversary of Elena's burial, the town gathered at the canyon's edge. This time it was not for mourning, but for hope. Flowers blanketed the graves. There were songs, laughter, and promises. Never again would silence reign in Red Canyon. Sage stood with Rosie and Ember, looking out over the place where it all began. The sun was rising, setting the canyon ablaze with color. She breathed in deeply, feeling the air clean and sweet, filled with the promise of new beginnings. She turned to the people gathered there, her voice clear and steady. Ember's story isn't just about a horse, or about us. It's about everyone who ever felt small or unheard, or afraid. It's about finding the courage to act when it matters. When you listen, to your heart, to each other, to the world, you honor the living and the lost. She paused, letting the words settle over the crowd. So share Ember's story. Remember what happened here. Let it change you. Because every act of bravery, no matter how small, can change a family, a town, maybe even the world. As the people cheered and embraced, Sage slipped an arm around Rosie, and Ember nuzzled them both, her wild eyes shining. Together they watched the sun rise over Red Canyon, a place forever changed by truth, courage, and the enduring legacy of a Mustang who refused to let darkness win. Share Ember's story, and remember, when you listen and act on what's right, you honor both the living and the lost.